The scripture reading for this morning comes from three epistles: Second Corinthians, the epistle to the Hebrews, and the epistle to the Romans. Second Corinthians 12, verses 9 and 10 say, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Hebrews 9:27 and 28. Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. Romans 15. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Last week, I began a series of sermons based on theologian Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer, a well-known prayer recited by millions in recovery groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous. And so last week, we considered the first phrase of the prayer: God, grant me the serenity. And I elaborated on the need for serenity. And I argued that the meaning of serenity is much broader than the word peace and could be better understood as calm or equanimity, which implies a steadiness of mind so that changing circumstances, whether those circumstances are wonderful or tragic, do not throw you off balance. And so today we will consider one category of circumstances that this prayer mentions that can indeed throw you off balance, that can cause you not to find serenity. And so let's refresh our memories on the first few lines of the Serenity Prayer. I said it's a long prayer, but virtually everyone knows the first few lines. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so this morning I want us to reflect on this category of circumstances, the things I cannot change. The things I cannot change. Now, what's interesting about that word change is that change is constant. Change is happening all the time. It's part of what reality is. It's always in the process of things changing. Even if you leave a room untouched and never go into that room, when you go in 100 years later, you will discover that that room will have changed. Okay? There'll be cobwebs and dust, and things will have deteriorated. And so it's just part of reality. Now, what's interesting about modernity, the modern world, is that change is taken as to the extremes. In fact, a book was written called Future Shock about the speed of change in the modern world. We can hardly keep up with it, and we know that. Every year a new kind of technology comes on the market, some kind of new phone and some new way of dealing with, maybe robots, of course, are developing those. And we have to try to adjust to those changes, and it becomes rather difficult to keep up with the speed of change. And so we suffer what Alvin Toffler called future shock. It leaves us disoriented and confused. But this idea that things are always changing, and also that science enables us to change almost everything, means that people tend to be very, very concerned and, in fact, very much into bringing about the changes that they desire. But it is truly tragic that many people experience a great deal of inner turmoil. They lose a lot of sleep and they develop ulcers and high blood pressure over things that cannot be changed. Over things that cannot be changed. Which tells me that we are all natural warriors, not warriors, but warriors, WORRIERS, warriors. And so that we need supernatural help to overcome this feeling we call worry, or psychologically, a better word, anxiety. All of us suffer from different anxieties. Now let's think about some of the things that in fact we cannot change. We need to think a little bit about the fact that there are several things in life that are unalterable. You can't do anything about it. And so there's no point in worrying about those things, or fretting, or being anxious or concerned about those things. Now, first of all, there's what are called, one thing that's unchanging are what are called accidents of nature. Accidents of nature. What is that? Well, again, that if this is all there is, uh, there's no supernatural dimension, then things happen to all of us that are simply part of existing. If you exist, then this is inevitable. Now, it's called by people who are secular or atheistic, they call them accidents of nature. But if we believe as Christians in an all-powerful, all-knowing, sovereign God who knows, in fact, how many hairs are on your head and knows when the little sparrow falls from the sky, then there are no such things as accidents. That in fact, an accident, in fact, has no meaning. It has no purpose. That's why we call it an accident. There's no will behind it. You can't go to the insurance company and say, I had an accident on purpose. They will not cover what you did. So accident is the opposite of purpose. And so if it's the opposite of purpose, it's also the opposite of meaningfulness. And so secular people believe that things that happen in their life that are mere accidents of nature are meaningless and cannot be comprehended or understood under any kind of framework or rubric. I know I'm being very vague and generic, but I'll give you some specifics in a moment. And so, as Christians, because we do believe in a sovereign God, in an all-powerful or all-knowing God, we believe that God has foreordained a host of things for every human being. In fact, as Christians, we would call it destiny. Destiny. As a Christian, there's no such thing as luck. As a Christian, there's no such thing as accident. There's only destiny, and therefore purpose. So as we stand here today, we have to look back at what was destined for us. Things that were beyond our control. And we have to ask God for at least the grace to accept what we could not change, and even more grace to go so far as to thank God for these unalterable realities. What God wants from us is not just acceptance, but actually to give him thanks for the things that are part of our life that are unalterable. What are some of those things? Well, first of all, the time and place of our birth. Can you alter that? You can't alter the time and place of your birth, right? You're here. I was born in 1956 in Puerto Rico. So I'm a Puerto Rican baby boomer. I can't change that. That reality has brought to my life both joys and pains. Right? First, one joy is the privilege of being born an American citizen, because all Puerto Ricans were made U.S. citizens with the Jones Act in 1917, many decades before my birth. But one pain that is part of my history, if you will, was the struggle to learn English, because Puerto Rico is a Spanish-speaking country. The struggle to learn English when my family left Puerto Rico for California. We were kind of weird. We never went to New York. We went straight to the West Coast, all right? And so that's an accident of birth. I had no part in it, right? I can't change that no matter what. Just like you can't change where you were born and when you were born. And so the fact that I was born in the 20th century, some of you were born in the 19th, that cannot be, I'm kidding. You didn't get the joke, okay. uh, we were all born in the 20th century, some earlier period and others a little later. And some of you may have been born, I see that young lady over there, probably in the 21st century, right? And she couldn't help that. And so those are things that are unalterable. Another accident of birth, which I would call God's destiny for each of us, are the parents we were born to. You know, that means our genetics and our upbringing. Our genetics and our upbringing. First, our genetics. I am the product of my parents. I have 23 chromosomes from my dad and 23 chromosomes from my mom. And because of that, I can't change the color of my skin. I cannot change the texture of my hair. I cannot change the color of my eyes. I cannot change the shape of my lips. I cannot change my height. And so that means I will never play basketball for the Los Angeles Lakers or any other basketball team, no matter how much I may imagine how wonderful it would be to be a professional basketball player. That's my fantasy. Others have the height, but they do not have the athletic ability, which is again largely inherited. LeBron James is a superstar because of his parents. He inherited their athletic ability. And so you know what else is unalterable? In spite of the current woke ideology which denies biological science, you are either born with a pair of XX chromosomes, which makes you female, or a pair of XY chromosomes, which make you male. Unless you are that rare genetic anomaly called an intersex person or hermaphrodite. To say that you are a woman trapped in a man's body or a man trapped in a woman's body is simply a psychological denial of objective reality. An unwillingness to accept things that cannot be changed. Now, we're thankful for the advances in medical science that are making great strides in treating genetic diseases such as sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, cystic fibrosis, and Huntington's disease. And so what in the past may have been for some, an unalterable fate. It would have been an unalterable fate. Today, they have hope of living a healthier life. And we thank God for that. As human beings, we cannot be passive in the face of suffering. In the face of suffering. And so we should use our intelligence and creativity to find possible solutions for human suffering. That's good. That's a good thing. But we also pray for that similar advances might be made in psychiatric medicine to help those in mental anguish. But until then, we need to pray for God's help to accept the things we cannot change with serenity and not fall into despair, depression, frustration, rage, and do silly things like mutilate your body. You know what else we cannot change? So we've spoken about, well, we do not get to alter who our parents are. And so that gives us our genetic makeup. I'm diabetic because diabetes runs on my mother's side of the family. I can't help that. Can't help that. Sometimes it skips people like my sister. My mother's siblings, the majority of them were diabetic, but there were some that were not. And so there's what appears to be something random, but I think of it as God's purpose for each of us. God gives us different crosses to bear, different things that we need to handle in our lives. And so, you know what else we cannot change? Our upbringing. Our upbringing. None of us, as I said, get to choose our parents. And since parents are human beings and so sinners and therefore flawed, they impact the lives of their children in a myriad ways. Now, many parents are wonderful. I'm sure your parents were wonderful, I hope, protecting, providing, guiding their children to become wonderful, responsible human beings in their own right. But other children, maybe you, other children carry with them the trauma of abandonment or of abuse, whether physical or emotional or sexual. They carry with them the trauma of their parents being alcoholic or drug addicts or domestic abusers. Maybe that describes one or both of your parents. It's part of your unalterable past, which has left you with psychological scars, with feelings of anger, resentment, maybe even guilt because you blame yourself for their behavior. And so you need to ask God to help you to let go of that pain, to help you to leave those hurtful memories in the past where they now are. They're in the past. But you can't cling to them. You can't hold on to them. You have to let them go with God's help. You cannot alter the past. You can't change your childhood, but you can change what you do with your pain going forward. Today, you can ask God to give you the strength to forgive. Whether it is to forgive your parents or maybe your one or several of your siblings or other relatives who may not even be alive today to hear you say, I forgive you. You can also ask God to help you to use those experiences in your past to help others today. And so Niebuhr's prayer is very apt. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Do you know what else is unalterable? What else is unalterable? Tragedy. We all have to deal with tragedy. The tragedy common to every human being is the death of loved ones. I feel very sad for this Williams family that have lost a husband and a father and a son. But that's the human condition. We lose loved ones in accidents. We lose loved ones to illness. We lose loved ones in senseless criminal acts. We lose loved ones in all kinds of ways, in unexpected ways, often. And so the tragedy common to every human being is experiencing the death, first of all, of one's parents, one's spouse, one's children, these being the most painful, but also the death of one's grandparents, aunts and uncles, and friends. Now, the loss of a loved one is an experience that can plunge us into such deep sorrow that we lose all desire to go on living. Some have even died of a broken heart. There's a great French scholar named Emile Durkheim in the early 20th century. He's a brilliant man, teaching in, I think it was the Sorbonne in France, and his son this is during World War I, was taken to the front in Belgium, and he was killed. He was killed. And it caused him such grief, he died within 1 year of his son's death. He couldn't function anymore. He stopped writing, he couldn't teach, he couldn't do anything. He dies. Some have even, as I said, have died of a broken heart, and it was just such a tragedy what Horatio G. Spafford was dealing with when he composed the hymn we've all sung, "It Is Well With My Soul." You see, in 1873, Mr. Spafford had planned a trip to Europe with his wife and their 4 daughters. But business reasons detained him, and he sent his family ahead. He was going to join them a little later. On the way across the Atlantic, their ship collided with another vessel, and it caused their ship to sink, resulting in the death of 226 people. Among them, Spafford's 4 daughters. 4 daughters. His wife sent him a telegram with 2 words, "Saved alone." And so he sailed to join his wife, and when he reached the very spot where the tragedy occurred, he composed this beautiful hymn, which we've all sung. The first verse says, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Now, none of us can imagine the sorrow of a father and a mother who loses all 4 daughters at one time. Yet he says God gave him the grace in that situation, gave him the serenity to be able to say, "It is well with my soul." And to put it in more modern parlance, he was saying, it's okay. I can face this because I know that my God is in control. My daughters are with Jesus, and I will see them again. It is faith in God what can give us the strength and hope to face unalterable tragedy. I don't know how atheists do it. How they deal with awful tragedy in their lives. Because I need to have faith in a God who gives meaning and purpose to horrible events. Another such unalterable tragedy is the experience of a disabling accident. The example that comes to mind is that of Joni Eareckson Tada. Have you heard of Joni Eareckson Tada? She's now, I think, in her 70s. In 1967, I think she was like 18, 17 or 18, she broke her neck. A beautiful Christian woman. She broke her neck in a diving accident, leaving her a paraplegic for the rest of her life. Paralyzed from the neck down. If you read her autobiography or watch some of her videos on YouTube, you will learn. You will learn about how she gradually went from feelings of rage towards God. God, why you let this happen to me? And then she began to have thoughts of suicide, and she tells how she tried to kill herself by just moving her neck back and forth to see if she could break it completely. And she goes on this journey of faith, traveling what she calls the hope-filled road of life, road to life. The hope-filled road to life. Basing her philosophy of life on Romans 15:13, the verse we have here. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And so in this situation that from, again, a secular perspective seems so hopeless, what's she gonna do? She can't walk, she can't move her hands. How is she going to be a productive citizen? You know how she began? Her father brought her an easel. It's kind of weird. She had to lay on her back. And a box of pencils. And the nurse would put a pencil on her mouth. And she began to draw with her mouth. And those people began to see those drawings. They said, wow, they're amazing. They didn't know it was a paraplegic that had drawn them with her mouth. They began to be shown in galleries. People began to buy her art. And then she revealed that she couldn't use her hands. And people marveled that she had found a life of purpose, creating art with her mouth. And gradually she recovered some movement. She was able eventually to be removed from a, what do they call it, a breathing thing in her throat. And she's now regained some movement in her arms and hands. And she got married. And so she is now an inspiration to millions of disabled people, showing how God can lift them out of despair to a life of meaning and purpose. There are things that you cannot change. She could not change her paralysis. She could not change the accident that she had. But God gave her a new way of living. The Apostle Paul faced some kind of disability himself that Bible scholars are not sure what it was. And some speculate that it was perhaps some kind of blindness. Now, again, it's in 2 Corinthians 12 here. I should have put verse 8, the verse right before. Let me read it to you here. it says that Paul the apostle, he writes, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Oh, I've gone over. Let me just quickly. He prayed for this thorn in the flesh to be removed. We don't know what it was. And so some speculate that it was some kind of blindness, because in the epistle to the Galatians, he writes, see with what large letters I write to you. But it's speculation. We don't know. Whatever it was, Paul prayed for God to heal him, but God did not heal him. Instead, God said to him, my grace is enough for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. And so God gives us the grace to handle what cannot be changed. And even more amazingly, God uses whatever others see as our weakness to show his power. And so through prayer, God can change our perspective on what we've gone through. Maybe the disability is not physical, but psychological. For example, many veterans of war, soldiers that have returned with what specialists call moral injury. They can't get over the fact that they participated in the killing of other human beings. And so they suffer a trauma that they cannot get over. For some, it's survivor's guilt. Some soldiers come back and say, well, my buddies, they got killed and I made it. Why? Why am I here? I shouldn't be alive. And so we need to come to God and surrender to him our painful memories, our thoughts in prayer, and accept what is now in the unchangeable past, so we can focus on the present and the future. And you can use your painful past to encourage others. We've run out of time. So sadly, I won't be able to tell you about the most unalterable thing we have to deal with, which is our own death. That is inevitable for every single one of us. And in fact, the scriptures say that we have an appointment with death. Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once. See, Jesus' death, again, was not an accident. It was his destiny to save humanity. And God has brought you to this world now because it's your destiny to be God's instrument in this world. And so, yes, there are things in your life that you cannot change, but you need to come to God and thank him for those things and ask him to give you the serenity to accept those things so that you can move forward and be an instrument of blessing to others. The Lord bless his word.